Martin Luther had a very negative view of the orders. Even though he himself came out of a monastery, he took a very negative view of monks afterwards and wanted to see the orders destroyed. This is Project Gutenberg.de. This is a collection of books that are in the public domain, which have been digitized and are publicly available. And this is Martin Luther's Table Talks. You can see here, he calls these monks Rattenmäuse, in other words, rat mice, to make a literal translation. This is not something that is a compliment, it is an insult. Let's have a talk about Martin Luther and the rat mice monks and why this might be important from a theological perspective. Martin Luther and the Rattenmouse monks. They were talking for a time about the monks' great power they used to have. Dr. Luther said, "The monks were the columns of the papacy. They carried the Pope, just like the rats carry their king." Similarly, Dr. Martin Luther said, "I have been the quicksilver of our Lord God, which he threw into the pond, that is, among the monks." Likewise, Dr. Martin Luther said, "The Barefoot Monks are properly the lice that the devil sets upon the skin of our Lord God. The black shield they carry up top is the pretense of penitence. The preaching monks, however, are the fleas. They have been biting each other eternally." I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Now, a note on the use of quicksilver or mercury. Mercury can act as a poison, so this may well be the context that he's applying here. He is the poison set amongst the monks. From a second perspective, we can say that human qualities like quickness, mobility, elusiveness, or being hard to pin down could be compared to the flowing, yet weighty nature of quicksilver in analogies and metaphors of that particular time period. For example, describing someone as like quicksilver may have suggested that they were slippery, changeable, or difficult to grasp firmly. Think of the term slippery like an eel. Now that we've established some of Luther's insults towards monks, let's take a look at Christian saints who were monks. There are many Catholic saints who were monks throughout history. Here are some notable examples. Saint Benedict, from 480 to 543. He's the founder of the Benedictine order. Saint Benedict is considered the patron saint of monks and monasticism. He established the rule of Saint Benedict, which is still followed today by many monastic communities. Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, Cistercian monk and theologian. Saint Bernard was a key figure in the reform of the Catholic Church during the 12th century. Saint Thomas Aquinas, 1225 to 1274. Although not a traditional monk, Saint Thomas was a Dominican friar who lived in a community of friars at the University of Paris. He wrote extensively on theology and philosophy and is considered one of the greatest thinkers in Christian history. Now, of course, St. Thomas was someone that Martin Luther took particular exception to. Martin Luther was not only against Catholic theology, he was also very much against the reasoning, the form of logic, known as scholasticism. He had a particular dislike for and hatred of Aristotle and Aquinas, who utilized Aristotle's principles to create the modern Christian logic. St. Dominic, the founder of the Dominican order. St. Dominic was a priest and missionary who was known for his zeal for spreading the gospel and combating heresy. St. Anthony of Padua, a Franciscan friar. St. Anthony was a renowned preacher and missionary who was known for his charismatic preaching and his ability to communicate with simplicity and clarity. St. Francis of Assisi, 1182 to 1226. The founder of the Franciscan order, St. Francis, was a charismatic figure who renounced his wealth and status to live a life of poverty and simplicity with his followers. St. Bonaventure, a Franciscan friar and theologian. St. Bonaventure was a close friend and biographer of St. Francis of Assisi. He wrote extensively on theology and spirituality and is considered one of the greatest thinkers in Christian history. St. John Cassian, monk and theologian, a key figure in the development of Western monasticism. He wrote extensively on spiritual themes, including the importance of prayer and contemplation. St. Vincent de Paul, a French priest and founder of the Congregation of the Mission. St. Vincent de Paul was a tireless worker amongst the poor and marginalized. He established hospitals, schools, and orphanages throughout France. Number 10, St. John of the Cross, a Carmelite friar and mystic. St. John of the Cross was a key figure in the Spanish mystical tradition. He wrote extensively on spirituality and is considered one of the greatest poets in Christian history. Now, these are just a few examples of the many Catholic saints who were monks or friars throughout history. The irony should not be lost that Martin Luther considered monks, not to forget, rat mice. They are the columns of the papacy. They carry the Pope just like rats carry a king. So these are rats. And of course, these are the lice that the devil sets on the skin of our Lord God, which is a very odd set of phrases, of course, in terms of speaking of these highly revered Christians. Hopefully you've learned something, and I'll see you soon.